Evening. We've come to Hingham, the Fair Housing Center of Greater Boston. Hingham is part of Greater Boston, and therefore we are here to talk fair housing with you. We've been going to communities all over the 5-county region that we serve to kind of talk to them and understand their fair housing needs, because we have been pretty interested that the communities have very different needs as far as fair housing goes. You think of fair housing as being black and white, but it turns out fair housing is gray a long part of the way. So we're here to find out more about what's happening in Hingham as opposed to what we found out in Bridgewater or Haverhill or wherever we've been. It's been an education, I will say that. So there are 8 of us who work at the Fair Housing Center. We do both education and outreach. We do research projects. We do enforcement, and we do testing. So we fought the broad range of fair housing. And what is fair housing? Is fair housing the same as affordable housing? Are there differences between fair and affordable housing? And we will be interested in kind of getting into a discussion about that. When we talk about fair housing, I passed out the basics, fair housing and the law, the basics. And I think that's where most people see fair housing. It's what we call the protected classes, and there are federally protected classes, and then there are Massachusetts protected classes.
Do we want to go around and make quick introductions?
Okay. I thought we could break into that in a few minutes. Okay. So Massachusetts has as many protected classes as any other state in the nation. And it keeps right up to date with the needs of the community. So things like gender information and transgender are new protected classes that have become important right at this moment, whereas things like race, color, national origin are what we think of as the old protected classes. So there are both new moving forward, and then there are the protected classes that we see the most with discrimination in Massachusetts: familial status, children in the household. And part of that comes from the problem with lead paint, which isn't right there as a protected class, but it creates the problem where landlords say, I'm not renting to you because you have children under 6. And I don't know if I have lead paint, and I'm not going to find out, which is against the law. Massachusetts has one of the strictest laws in the country. So the older fair housing laws are there, but the newer ones, veterans are a protected class, which most people don't even realize. Asking about people's military service is illegal, because some people would say, I don't want to rent to a veteran. There are too many problems that veterans have. So it's the basics are the protected classes, and then beyond the basics, you have the things you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to, basically, you're not allowed to lie. As a homeowner, if your house is for rent or for sale, you can't say, because you don't like the color of someone's skin, oh, I'm sorry, I took it off the market. I mean, it's very basic. You can't change the price. Oh, I was going to sell it for $400,000, but you offered $400,000. The price is now $500,000. I mean, it's basic honesty is what we're talking about. And that's really what fair housing is about. And then we get to affordable housing, which is something quite different. And that's kind of what the introduction I wanted to bring to the table as a basis for the discussion of fair housing. But there are a lot of, I don't know, nooks and crannies might be the way to put it, where we end up that it becomes discrimination. So that we can discuss as the discussion moves along. So, I didn't introduce myself, so I will begin by saying I'm Ann Seligson. I work at the Fair Housing Center of Greater Boston. I do education and outreach, and I've been doing it for about 30 years at this point, mainly in New York. But I made the transition to Boston about 5 years ago, and I'm enjoying it. So,
My name is Dwayne Tyndall, and I'm the manager of education outreach for Fair Housing Center of Greater Boston, and that's who I am.
My name's Kevin Connolly. I sit on the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust.
I'm Nancy Kerber. I also sit on the Hingham Affordable Housing Trust.
I'm Barbara Franklin, Director of Elder Services.
And I'm Irma Lauder, one of the 3 selectmen.
And I'm Mary Savage Dunham, Director of Community Planning. Thank you for coming out tonight.
our pleasure. You're going to go on?
No, you could.
No, you're going to go on at this point?
Okay. So, do you want me to start on the affirmative?
Practicing fair housing? Yeah.
Okay. So one of the regulations that
Okay.
is affirmatively furthering fair housing, and it's basically a regulation that promotes fair housing practices as a planning tool. I know that Hingham is not an entitlement city, but there's still some tools that are available from the federal government. Like they developing this really nice data tool that you can make really good assessments of what's in your town and municipality. That's really good because it's given like a unified data sets all across the country. And I think a lot of the smaller municipalities could utilize the data. So what is fair housing planning? It's activities undertaken by local, state, regional agencies and governing bodies to eradicate and prevent discrimination and segregation within and through the action policies, investments, programs, including those of the public and private sectors. So the goal is that if particularly the public sector is involved in development, it should use fair housing principles. So it won't perpetuate discrimination. It is not limited to housing and community development matters, but it includes all disciplines that directly and indirectly connect to rental, real estate, advertising, home insurance, lending, and land use, as well as siting of affordable housing and public and private services that are available to a community, including education, transportation, and health. Now, they also talk as siting of affordable housing. Some municipalities have affordable housing, but it's in one particular section of town. And one of the things that the affirmatively furthering fair housing is promoting is that if possible and when possible, that affordable housing should be integrated into the general community. And I think that makes for a more balanced community. And there are tools and models that show, a lot of times when people think of affordable housing, they think of the affordable housing that went wrong in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. But there are many models of mixed income affordable housing that's done right, and it could be integrated into the landscape of the neighborhood and maintain the architectural integrity of the neighborhood. And also,
How
you,
does that work in Hingham?
how does that work in Hingham?
Yeah,
I'm not sure how it
let's
works.
ask.
Oh, okay. Yes.
In terms of affordable housing integrated in Hingham, I think we've seen an interesting spectrum as the town has approached that. Affordable housing isn't concentrated in one area. We have 40B developments on Whiting Street, which is on the south side of town. Most recently, we have had a cottage community development on Beale Street on the, is that north side of town? Which has an affordable component as well as market rate units.
So it's a mixed income?
Yes.
Okay.
So we've, all the 40Bs in town have been a mixed income affordable housing approach that we've used.
Do you think people know that there are different income levels, or, I mean, the general population, or do they just think people are renting them or buying them, you know?
General population, I think it just all blends together.
So there's no stigma
No.
attached to them. There can be.
Yes.
That's why I'm
Perhaps
asking.
within the developments, but I don't know. And the only couple that I know about, it seems not, everyone seems pretty welcoming of, everyone knows who's in the affordable units, but they're happy. It's a,
Are they affordable units for people who previously lived in Hingham, or are you getting new population?
a mix.
It would be a mix.
And I have lots of questions. How do you advertise? How do you get people to come to your affordable units?
Well, usually it's the process of selection is subcontracted, someone approved to orchestrate the lottery. So they have
The lottery?
Yes. So everybody who's interested in applying would have to be vetted, fill out an application, and then the lottery agent would go through and actually select from there.
A nonprofit does it for you, or is it a management company, or how do you?
I'm not sure. I think it's both. I think
I think it varies from project to project. We have
Yeah.
LIP projects, we have 40B projects. It's typically a state agency that specializes in affordable housing, but it
But
can
they're not
vary.
running the lottery. They're setting the terms of how
I
the
believe
lotteries
so.
run,
No, I know
but they're
we
not
just-
running them.
We just went through a change on who was doing it. If you remember, not this year, but the year before, there was a warrant article that I think we turned a lot back over to DHDC.
yes.
But-
I think you're right.
Yes.
On the ones we've been involved in, we've,
The monitoring. And then,
maybe on the monitoring.
and then people pick a lottery agent to run the particular lottery.
Yeah.
And I'm drawing a blank on the state agency that does a lot of that.
That, but there's we have a different, there's a different agent for the lottery typically than the monitoring, but there's a state agency, which I'm just blanking on the name, that handles a lot of the lottery work.
Not mass housing.
I don't think it's mass housing.
It may be buried in there. There's so many organizations with the alphabet soup. Very honestly, it's hard to keep track of it. But we work very closely with them.
And that is one of the reasons why, kind of like coming out to some of the smaller towns are pretty good, because I don't think a lot of people realize how much work and effort towns are putting into kind of thinking about how can we make our housing stock a little bit more diverse for different people. So it's just, I think that's a positive, just to begin to get that message out to the people. And also, it's a lot of innovation that happens at the smaller towns, how they kind of figure out how this mixed income, affordable housing stock is integrated into community. And that in and of itself needs to get out, need to be put out there, because other towns are struggling with these issues also. So when we go to like a town like Marblehead or Hingham, we hear new ideas, how they thinking about it, how they implement it, and that's one of the things that we want to kind of bring out to other communities, like, hey, this is what they're doing over here. And also create an environment where different, like affordable housing trusts or what have you, or fair housing, folks could come together and start having these conversations, because a lot of the smaller municipalities all have their own unique issues, how they're going to manage things. And you're not alone trying to figure out the 40B. Some have figured out the 40B or met their 40B requirements, but it's still an ongoing struggle how we kind of make this product the best product as it could be. So, I mean, I'm pretty happy about how hearing about something that when people think of certain towns, they really don't think it's intellectual energy or effort that will go on in this process. And mostly every time we went to so far, actually really are thinking about how we're going to make this work.
Well, I think one of Hingham's strengths is the Housing Trust. And the group has done a couple very new things this past year. And maybe you all could share the Beale Street condo,
Yes.
the Whiting Street house,
Yes.
and then reaching back, the Father Bill's Veterans House. So maybe you all could talk about those three and really knock their socks off.
You know most about all three of them.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what is a housing trust? Like what is
The Hingham Affordable Housing Trust is a town committee, I guess.
Yes.
That by bylaw
Yep.
has been asked by the town to work on affordable housing and has been given monies from the town to invest and create and maintain affordable housing in town.
How long has this been in
I
existence?
think 2008 or 9, it was established as a bylaw.
Okay.
And it's to preserve as much as we can of the affordable housing, create new, but the preservation is really important, and I know that's why I very much wanted this, where Hingham is very lucky. We do have a great deal of economic diversity. This might be hard to find sometimes, but it is there.
Yes.
And we have a tremendous number left of very small, comfortable houses. But as they get bought out, and as people move on or leave the state, these houses are bought by, in general, by people with perhaps sufficient means to then turn them into very larger houses. And one of the real pushes for establishing the trust was, as we could, find these little houses, buy them. Some will need a lot of work. Fix them up, deed restrict them, and then sell them as affordable into the future.
And when you say buy them, how do you finance the purchase of these?
Well, by guess and by golly. Actually, the Housing Trust does receive money. It does also get money from the CPC. And over the last few years, we've managed to set up an opportunity fund.
Yes.
And then I know there's another fund, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's to fund things like Lincoln School apartments if they need some,
Right.
I can't remember what the name of, that's
You
terrible.
said CPC, I'm sorry.
Community plan.
Community
Pres-
preservation, what's
Yeah.
the C?
It's an act, really.
It's an act,
But we have a
CPA, yeah.
community preservation.
So that there's a
committee.
certain percentage of add to everyone's taxes,
Okay.
and that goes into a fund that then gets allocated for
Okay.
a variety of things in town: historic preservation, open space preservation, and affordable housing,
And recreation.
and recreation.
So it gets a portion, but there is money there for affordable housing, and we're always looking for projects that fit into that category. And one of the big things that happened over the last couple years is this opportunity fund, where a chunk of money, I think it was $150,000, was given to the CPC for the last 2 years,
Given
maybe.
from the CPC.
From the CPC to the Housing Trust, to use as condos come on the market, as a little house comes on the market, where they had funds, where they could kind of jump on it and buy it, rather than wait till the next town meeting. and then get a loan until it could get fixed up. And we have very, very helpful banks around that support this. In fact,
Are they local banks? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Because that's one thing, like in our travels, we noticed that people who use this model, acquisition of properties, aren't going to Wells Fargo, they go into like kind of like regional local banks
Our
to.
local banks are very supportive, and they're very supportive of the community. Well, Hingham Institute has been here forever. And we've got Eastern Bank now, South Shore Bank, they're very good to the town as well, and others. So if I forget somebody, I apologize. But Hingham Institute has been very good to give, a short-term loan until you can fix it up and then turn it over and resell it deed restricted.
And there's been a mix of ways that the town's acquired properties. Some are just, a condo or a smaller house that we've bought, fixed, and resold through the lottery. The most
Whiting Street?
Whiting Street was given, it was sort of it was a funny little knob on a property that didn't fit in the development plan, so as part of just their agreements with the town, that piece got carved off with a house on it and given to the town for affordable housing.
And originally, that parcel of land was thought to be used for a public safety building, which would have meant we would have lost the house. But we've made other arrangements, or are in the process of making other arrangements for, down the road, a new public safety, like a joint firehouse, police station. So this was fabulous. And the house, the two of us would have killed to have a house like this as a first house. It is gorgeous. And the view out the back is phenomenal. It's all conservation land or open land.
And is that a mix? That's a mixed income unit? Did y'all make it into like is it a multiple unit?
Just a single unit.
Just a single unit, and y'all just made it
Standalone house,
affordable.
and it'll be,
Nice.
But it serves your point that we shouldn't have all of our affordable housing in one place.
Right.
That this is very, very different. This is across town for probably our largest concentration of affordable units. And it really, no one would ever know that this is going to be affordable.
And it's funny that's one of the things that maybe some of our larger cities could learn from some of our smaller towns. That because sometimes by habit or by plan, it become that neighborhood and so forth. And I think most people believe if you integrate it around it, it will never be that particular neighborhood. It's just a neighborhood where a diverse set of folks decide to live.
right.
Yeah. What is fair house planning? With a community planning and development perspective, look directly at the needs for housing and possible barriers to meeting those needs. The fair housing perspective focuses much on the causes of needs of groups or persons protected by the Fair Housing Act as it does on the needs themselves. So one of the possible barriers is the housing stock, and that's one of the things that you started to address with the acquisition of properties. Do you have plans in the next do you have like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, or how do you plan this process out? I know it's limited relative to units, and I know it's limited to resources, but how do you think in the next 4 or 5 years? And this is not a loaded question, so if you say, well, we just doing it as what we could get, we could get, that's fine.
Project
by project.
with overall goals.
Yes.
And we're just starting in on a parcel of land now that the town owns, and the selectmen, it's called the selectmen's parcel, that was allotted for affordable housing. Okay. So we're just starting in on working with finding architects and planners, and then developing a plan for that.
Because the largest city.
So that's our sort of
Okay.
That's our next project, so that's what's in our future.
And how many units do you think that will be? How many units for that?
The
Ballpark.
property is 10 to 12 acres, and there can be 20 to 40 units on it. How they're distributed is still, that's part of what we're developing.
And is that, there's specified income levels, if I remember
Yes.
correctly?
Yes.
And could you explain that?
Who remembers them?
I don't remember. This was back in 2008 that this happened. I think it was quite a few years ago. And then the economy tanked. So, and it goes anywhere from
Like it's,
25% income level all the way up to 120.
I think that's about right.
Somewhere in there, but then the question now becomes, and I don't know the answer, hopefully you guys will, if we were allowed to put in market rate units, because if you're a developer and you're going to be asked to develop 20 to 40 units and everything's below market rate,
That's a difficult project.
I think that is so well stated. I mean, where are you going to get somebody to say, sure, I'll build it at a loss, which is actually you're doing. So I know a query went out, could there be some market rate?
It's my understanding that there can be some market rate,
Oh, good.
and what we're hoping to do is strike the balance. We had,
But also explore sources of funding. I think different mixes of income levels will open doors to different sources of funding. So exploring really, I think it will be a mix, but just what that mix is still in the works.
In some communities, they use the 1/3 concept, like 1/3 market, 1/3 moderate income, and 1/3 like low income. And that's the way that you keep neighborhoods,
Right.
you know, economically diverse also, even in self-contained, but also is how you manage, how do you actually finance that piece. This is always a little bit interesting. I know y'all was doing some work around the elderly housing piece also. Is anyone?
That's our greatest need, in my opinion. Just knowing people around town, and I think Barbara could back that up. The largest growing segment of our population is our older population. And we need affordable housing of two kinds. So I always have to make the distinction. As people are moving out of their homes and looking for smaller homes, some will need affordable housing as defined by the state, the lottery and economic levels. But a large number of our older citizens are looking to stay in the town that they grew up in, they raised their family, they may go back generations. And they're looking for affordable housing, whether it's condos, whether it's what I know growing up in Florida as patio homes, but are open to everybody. So like not lottery, it's if you sell your $1 million house,
You have the money.
you have the money, you don't qualify for affordable housing as defined by the state. But also it's very hard to take that $1 million and then plan for living another 20, 30 years in Hingham. So that's the kind of housing we need. We need the full spectrum to support our senior population, of which we're all getting there. And the exciting project that I hope I live to see it, we're very lucky in Hingham. We have what's called Lincoln School Apartments, and it's 60 units. The town owns it. And it's set up as an LLC. It's all Section 8, and it's for seniors and handicapped. And we're pursuing, and it's going to be a journey, because nobody's ever done this before, but that's not going to stop us. To add capacity and add a wing, and even if we pick up 20 units, that's 20 people or 20 couples that don't have to leave Hingham. It's central in town. You can walk to Nona's ice cream shop, which is important, and to the center of town. But that's like quite a ways away.
But would that also be section, you said this
Yes.
is all Section 8?
I'm saying that, but we've also floated, and I've talked to Mass Housing on this, because we have somebody that works there that lives in Hingham. And he's also going to float up a balloon to say, to support this, could we have, let's say we can add 20 units, and I don't know what the number is.
Could you do 120% or market rate?
Could you do 10 market rate
Right.
and 10 more Section 8? Because that 10 market rate could make all the difference for the revenue flow. So it's a journey, but the selectmen's parcel will come first, and then this one will take a while.
I'm going to throw out something I threw out before that we talked about a little, that when you raise the senior population, I thought I was going to throw it out, but all of a sudden I can't remember what I was going to throw out now.
I think last time you was talking about families also.
I would, no, the having apartments, accessible apartments in some of the senior, if somebody wanted to have an apartment in their big old house, that.
Thank you, Mary.
Actually, the planning board formed a study group with representatives from the general public and our wonderful boards and commissions, and it's the accessory unit study group. And they're actually working diligently to talk about accessory units. We don't currently have a provision for that within our bylaw, and it's more complex than you would think.
Everything is more.
Nothing is simple.
Nothing is simple.
So there's an interest in having the dialogue and a strong commitment to doing it right. There's an identified need, and there's a will to meet the needs of people that live in Hingham and people that don't. But it's just figuring out what the right way forward is. So that group is meeting again November 5th, and targeting to present their report to the planning board November 17th. And depending on the outcome, we may have a warrant article this year, or we may have a strong foundation for an ongoing dialogue. That's up to the study group.
Because I lived in communities that had accessible apartments, and they were highly successful, because when the family has moved away, for many children, they loved the fact that there was somebody else in the house with their parents. And there were ways to screen and be sure the tenant was somebody you wanted in the house without doing it in an unfair way, but that it worked out really very well. And the first complaint was there'll be too many cars. There weren't more cars then. As you know, there were all of the complaints, but in each community it brought in younger people who could afford apartments in the area.
Do you have specific guidance on how you might guide that tenancy discussion in a fair way? Because that is an interesting point of the conversation.
Yeah, no. I can go back and see how it was done, but I just think you have to have somebody who has some fair housing background and can help guide the discussion. So it's not that we don't want these people, but rather setting up a list of criteria.
We'd be interested.
And one of
if
the
you had something to share.
things that we really want to do is try to share some best practices around those issues, and make it available to smaller towns, because that's one of those unique issues that a town like Hingham has to face in the future as the population begin to age. And like, how do you manage an older population? You have room and so forth. And that's one of the examples that we want to begin to share some information and make it available, because we do a lot of policy work in the center, and we get a lot of information that goes through us. We just want to be able to share that information to to our towns.
That would be wonderful. It's a perfect timing, actually, for us.
It is.
Because one of the things that HUD is pushing towards, and I know you're not an entitlement town, but the analysis of impediments, which is a contract that towns and cities who receive resources from HUD, document what are their impediments to fair housing. The new document is assessment to fair housing, and that assessment of fair housing is embedded with the fair housing principles, and what HUD is looking towards is to have that assessment of fair housing embedded in different planning documents. So, as we move forward in the next year, 2 years, for the assessment of fair housing, we would like to share that with your organization to see how that could be one of the planning tools, because one of the major things that they want community participation. And I think community participation is, democracy actually works sometimes. So, it may take a couple hours longer, but the community participation component is a major piece of that. And also getting different ideas from different municipalities, not just from the state of Massachusetts, but all over the country. And that's what we're trying to share with our towns. Like, these are the things that are actually working. And the interesting thing, every time I hear local banks playing a part of achieving affordable housing goals, that's way too quiet. That should be something that is pushed out there, and also to remind some of the larger financial institutions that you may have community responsibility. Because that's always been one of the things with local banks. It was connected to neighborhoods and communities, and there's a sense of responsibility, of community, of neighborhoods. So as we hear more of this, these are the type of best practices that we want to promote to other towns as they kind of figure out this puzzle of fair housing. So I'm finished with my part.
Do you have any information on potential funding? We have some, we didn't talk about our veterans housing yet, which we really should, but is there any funding stream out there now that you know of with all the veterans coming back that we should be looking to? It would be.
It's really a hard area. You'd think there would be a lot of funds. There aren't.
I don't know, but that's something that we'll keep on our radar. I think that really a lot of the municipalities need to kind of like speak in like a more unified voice regarding about veterans and the services they need. It's almost like for some of our vets, it's almost like a shelter plus care vouchers, meaning they need supports, right? Some of them need supports, but they also need shelters. But guess what? We have shelter plus care vouchers that, serve different populations. So that's, especially with some that are struggling with the reentry back into neighborhood life, community life, it's really important to kind of see what are the best practices in other areas. Like I worked with the chronically homeless, and we was able to house and employ that population. But we also work with the veterans, New England Center for Homeless Veterans, right? And we worked with a segment of their population. We housed them and we employed them. And we housed them this transitional housing, then we eventually got them into more stable housing. So the best practices are there, and I even believe that the resources are there. It's not like a political awareness or a political will to kind of like, this is going to cost $50 million. This is the cost, or this is going to cost. We have to be willing to price things out and say this is going to actually cost resources, and we will have veterans coming back from this war and the impacts of this war, and some will integrate better than others, but it could be something that could impact communities all across the state. So we will keep, and veterans are a part of the protected class. So a lot of times when people think about fair housing, it's like, okay, black, white, religion, this and that. No, veterans is also a protective class, and we need to utilize that leverage to try to help our vets get the resources they need and connect them with resources that they need. So, yeah, that's something that we're paying attention to.
Yeah, we're definitely tuned into it, but not finding the resources.
But it's hard. but it's something that we really need to pay attention to.
But I know you have a house here for veterans.
Father Bill's house. And we have a very active veteran service organization. In fact, Jamie Litchfield is here temporarily because our VSO is in Somalia for 15 months. We have Lisa Potts, who's the administrative person, and we have a very, very wide-ranging veterans program. And then the Father Bill's house, they do get involved with reviewing who goes in there. And it's 6 or 8 units. Do you guys remember? I can't remember. Is it 8?
I can't remember.
It's either 6 or 8 units.
There are Father Bill's houses in other communities.
Yes.
Yes.
This is not just Hingham.
Correct, but this is one in Hingham.
You have one here, but...
Yes,
yeah.
it is beautiful.
How long have the fathers
Bill.
Years
2.
since it opened?
Yeah.
2,
Two
I think.
And do you know how many units?
It's either 6 or 8.
And is it transitional housing type of, or is like
Yes,
I thought it was supportive.
supportive?
yes.
It's supportive
Housing, and the town funded that and helped through the CPA Act
That's right.
again?
Yep.
Okay, so the CPA Act.
Help.
The town helped
Right.
build it, and then Father Bill's is running the
Yeah.
program.
And that's what I was kind of talking about, the shelter plus care for, like, that's a population.
It's a similar...
It's a similar model. And
Yes.
It's been very popular.
And it's full, isn't it?
It is.
No, it's been very successful. Very successful.
And that was, the monthly subsidy is through the VASH program.
Okay.
And so we have the 6 or 8 VASH vouchers in there attached to the units
Okay.
for the veterans.
What have you found across the state for some other best practices that maybe in communities similar to Hingham? I know you referred to Marblehead at one point.
Marblehead has a very active fair housing committee. They were very surprised when we were there. They were like, well, everyone is required to have a fair housing committee. And we said, no, about 10 communities in the whole state have them out of 500 or something. I mean, they're quite unique. And they also have built housing. And what was interesting was they have tried very hard to push for diversity in their residents, in the people they're renting to or selling to. They have not wanted it to just be, as I call it, plain vanilla Marblehead residents. They were looking for cocoa or something a little different, right? Black coffee.
Tea.
Tea.
Cream.
So they hired a company to advertise that they had 1 and 2 bedrooms apartments available at below market rents, affordable, and the company they hired, they discovered after nobody came, they instead of advertising in Lynn and in surrounding communities that have actually low-income populations, they advertised in Milton, in communities that were like Marblehead, and it made no sense. If people had settled in Milton, they wanted to be close in. They didn't want to be an hour out. And so they got nobody, and they were quite discouraged by the whole thing. And we said, well, why didn't you just advertise next door and down in Beverly and the whole area? Well, we didn't realize they'd done it. And then, so we filled it with people from Marblehead. And so next, there's going to change their approach for their next affordable housing. But, so that was a problem they ran into. They were very surprised because they were seeking something else.
The other thing is that there's support for these kind of conversations, and we are part of the apparatus to give support to that type of conversation. The thing is, having a Fair Housing Commission, you have someone paying attention. And if the commission is structured correctly, it's diverse voices around and perspectives paying attention. Because when things fall apart, or when people retire, or when people move on, if you don't have like an institution to pay attention, things become distant memories.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I really liked about Marblehead, they had a committed Fair Housing Commission. Now, the practices will come with practice. I mean, you can do things like that. In retrospect, we could do A, B, and C, but the powerful thing is that you have a structure to pay attention to these issues. And fair housing is the protective classes, which we went over, is also fair lending, which impacts all communities, and is also this planning tool. So it's a nice little portfolio that is almost ready-made for communities to utilize at their discretion.
I see our housing trust fulfilling that role very much.
So do I.
Yeah, very much.
No, and it certainly sounds like it is.
They do a great
And
job. I'm
you could
very
just
proud of them.
add on to it fair housing. So, no, I think you're absolutely right. You're working hard on it. And
We have our bias to fair housing because we're a fair housing agency, but I always tell people that fair housing is a part of American legacy. A lot of people worked very, very hard just to get to this point that this is a baseline where we should try to operate in the community. And it's worth, since I always tell people that, at one time or another, we'll all be a part of a protected class. And that's and in Massachusetts, we all will. You get in there. But hey, all joking aside, like when Uncle so-and-so get in a car accident and he don't have his mobility and he needs to get into his unit, it protects Uncle. And it's a wide range of piece of protection. So it's always good to have people just to be conscious of, like, we worked really hard as a society just to get to this point to have this conversation without looking at each other cross-eyed, right? So we should do what we need to do to perpetuate and remind each other about, like, some of these things are really vital to making a society that we want to live in. So that's our little...
that's our talk.
That's our little...
I think the only group we didn't talk about, which is part of all of this, are people with disabilities, which you just mentioned, so that as you're building and renovating, we want to be sure that you're thinking about people with disabilities, that it really, that's where we're all going at some point. And so, and there are a lot of good, strong protections for them, and we do enforce them quite vigorously when we find, especially small landlords will decide it isn't important, and when somebody asks for a reasonable accommodation or reasonable modification, we really go to bat. So we believe that we want to keep people as much involved in the community as possible, and things like a ramp make a huge difference to their lives. So.
But also we have tools to help remind and instruct. I think some of the issues that we face is that it's the lack of like information, or the information flow doesn't flow as effectively. And so we have some nice tools available that we go to make available to towns to kind of help them think about accessibility in 2014.
Right.
And that's where we all going, like, let's get the best practices. It's too much good work going on in our state. We just need to share this information as much as possible and give that support.
Right, so we are available anytime, and we have other people in our office who are available.
Super.
Okay?
I have no other questions, or?
Okay.
I have no answers.
I'm just happy to be here.
Down again.
Thank you.
That was very, very interesting, and I think what you've shared with the audience is people may have a higher learning now on what protected classes are and what fair housing is. But rest assured, we're in good shape with the Housing Trust.
Sounds good.
Thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
So motion to adjourn?
Got it.
Second, right?
Second.